This video that you're about to see is awesome. I enjoyed this very much because it's actually a real discussion, believe it or not, and a real debate that happened on Fox and Friends. Now, we've seen previous clips where clearly Steve Doocy and Brian Kilmeade, they don't like each other. That's very clear. Maybe there was a time when they did, but over the years, you know, sitting next to the same person for that long and you start to rub each other the wrong way, and now they very clearly have some tension and don't like each other. So what they're going to do here is they played that Bill Maher clip with Barry Weiss, where Barry Weiss and Bill Maher did this whole thing of on real time, like, I'm done with COVID. I'm done with it. I sanitized my Pringles cans and I watched all of Tiger King and I'm done. She does this whole like grandstanding, basically like all the COVID restrictions are complete and total bullshit and we're sick of it. Let's quote unquote get back to normal. That's the right thing to do. So now you'll see here the Fox and Friends panel mostly agrees with that. But Doocy has like some reservations, and then him and Kilmeade go at it. Let's take a look and then I'll react.
Look, the whole thing is Omicron. The only thing that works against Omicron is the Glaxo antibodies and the Pfizer pill. And we don't have any of those. Them. When it comes to Delta, you know, the shots actually did provide protection. People are just frustrated. But keep in mind, it is still killing 10,000 people a week. 10,000 people a week are dying from COVID. And people are thinking, oh, you just get it's like a cold. I had it. It was the worst cold of my life. It was not at all pleasant.
Everyone's different.
Everybody is different.
But the survivability is 98%. And you want to live your life running around, hiding for 2.5 years. Are you kidding? She's 100% right.
I certainly am not hiding. I'm just being careful. A lot of people, you know, I'm in my 60s. A lot of people over 60 are being careful because they don't want it. And it's killing 10,000 people a week.
That's understandable, and you can be. And everyone is heartbroken for these families that have lost the 10,000 family members. But when it comes to little kids who are not normally affected, they do get it. But most of the kids, it's not that serious.
There's variables with the variants.
It depends on the age group that you're talking about. It depends on if you have comorbidities. It depends on so much. So I think, you know, but we're allowed to have these discussions, and they're just sharing their frustration.
And we are all frustrated.
But it's frustration and reality. Frustration is because we're listening to people who don't know what the hell they're talking about and are ruining lives at the same time. Almost everything they said has been contradicted over the last 2.5 years. And if you listen to them and are careful and you get it anyway and you did exactly what they said and then they changed the rules and never acknowledged that they told us the wrong stuff, that's what drives people crazy. We've destroyed our lives with people who are making it up as they go along, and they're still in charge, like Anthony Fauci, and the CDC director has never been more over her head. She drowns on a daily basis, and no one's giving her any help. We have a president out there who can't stop cursing instead of answering questions, instead of lining up experts behind him, because he clearly is not. He goes out by himself and just give messaging. And the people are done with it. I want to get on. We have to get on with our lives. We got to stay on the couch. We got to work through it. His message should be, my new message is, living with it, not running from it. Here's how. Move back to work.
But you've got to be careful.
In what way?
It's still.
What mask? Does the mask work being careful? Then they tell us the cloth mask doesn't work. Really? 2.5 years later, I'm wearing a mask that doesn't work?
Brian, everybody in this building, for the most part, except us, is wearing a mask.
Right. So, but they don't work. They just told us they don't work. This only helps you 2%. So now they want us wearing a N95 where you can't breathe and ends up with dents on your face. We want to do that for the rest of our lives?
It just depends on your age group. My friends that are in their 80s, they're just not going out. If they go outside, if they eat outside, if they go to a restaurant, they eat outside. That's right.
But do you want them kicked out of a restaurant if they walk in and decide not to? That's where we're at right now. People live their lives on a regular basis.
All right, so let's break this down a little bit. First of all, the mask claim. It's overstated. Yes, cloth masks don't work nearly as well as other masks, but they are better than nothing. So there was a study from Bangladesh that came out not too long ago. Cloth masks stop about 37% of particulate matter. They're not going to stop the tiny aerosols that the virus can be carried in. But then you have surgical masks, and the fabric that surgical masks is made out of is made specifically to try to, reject those little aerosols and, of course, the big droplets. And so surgical masks block 76% of particulate matter. And by the way, all this is important because viral load might be a serious issue. Viral load is how much of the virus are you taking in? Because if you're getting a giant dose of it up front, you can probably have a worse bout with COVID than if you get a smaller amount up front. Anyway, and then you have KN95 masks. I didn't see specifics on them, but the general understanding is that they're roughly in the area of surgical masks with how good they are. They have to be real and not fake ones, which is a totally separate question. But then N95 masks actually have a 95 to 99% protection rate from the virus. Now, a lot of people might think, well, hold on now, I've been masked and then I got the virus and I was even wearing maybe an N95 mask and I still got the virus. Well, then that comes full circle to what I've told you guys before on this show. I seem to be the only person talking about it 2 years into the pandemic, but there were a number of studies that found that COVID can enter through your eyes. So if you're wearing an N95 mask that's protects you almost perfectly, 95 to 99%, and you ended up getting COVID, it's very likely the case that it got in through your eyes. I mean, think about it. Somebody's coughing 4 feet away from you in your direction, and your respiratory system is covered, but your eyes are wide open and available for stuff to get into it. What's going to happen? It's going to get into your eyes. Okay, anyway, I digress from that. So it's a little overstated. Cloth masks don't work. They don't work nearly as well as the other masks, but it still could help with viral load, so on and so forth. Now, Kilmeade is pointing something out there that's actually true. He's pointing out, look, the institutions and the officials have lied to us or just flat out been wrong every step of the way. And so people don't trust them, and they're right not to trust them. On that point, I think he's kind of right. But he takes it one step further, which is, hey, that's the case, and therefore it's all bullshit. No, that makes no sense. The fact that the institutions and the officials have lied or just been wrong almost every step of the way just means you should look at them skeptically. So, you should try to verify whatever they're saying by looking at other independent studies, hopefully peer-reviewed as well. And that's not to say don't be cynical, because there are a lot of people who've gone full cynical in response to this, which just means that's Kilmeade's position. Since they've been wrong, therefore it's all bullshit. And you just throw your arms up. You're like, we don't have any answers. We don't know any answers. We can't know any answers. And therefore, I'm just going to let it rip. Which gets to the broader conversation about the economy here. Guys, Kilmeade, you won. You won. Bill Maher, Barry Weiss, you won. You're getting your exact policy preference. It's happening right now. Everything's open. We are letting it rip. We are just living our lives. And guess what? Look, there are upsides to that, of course. I'm sure from a mental health perspective, a lot of people are doing better because any sort of lockdown is generally tough psychologically, so on and so forth. But it's also true that letting it rip, we have 2,000 deaths a week. That's what we have right now. That's just a fact. You might not like it. You might want to prioritize your feelings over the facts, but that is a fact. And so if you look at that and you say, I've decided it's okay, well, fair enough, but just say that. Be honest about that. Because Kilmeade actually was too honest at one point and he let slip what he's really thinking, which is get back to work. Oh, get back to work. Now, a lot of people don't have jobs where they can, quote unquote, get back to work and be relatively safe. A lot of people working in the service sector, lower wage workers, people who are generally poor, they have much higher risk jobs. And what Kilmeade wants is for those people to definitely get back to work because it's an inconvenience for him if those people are not back to work. Okay, well, again, just be honest and upfront with all this stuff because that's the gist of it. And be honest and upfront with this stuff that you guys are taking the Koch brothers approach, the billionaire and corporate America approach of like, okay, we can handle 2,000 deaths a week. Just get back to work. Now, the reason why Ducey is more cautious here, and he said it. He said, listen, I'm in my 60s. I had it. And if it's a cold, it was the worst cold of my life. So he had it and he had a bad case of it. Okay. And there's a conservative instinct. Whenever something happens directly to you, that's when you change your mind. So you could show them all the empirical data in the world. Hey, here's what's happening to other people. And they just yawn and shrug it off. Ducey's like, this happened to me. I'm in my 60s. If it was a cold, it was the worst cold of my life. It was terrible. Therefore, he understands and he gets why people should be taking massive precautions. So he has a little bit of a softer view on it because it personally impacted him. Now, the other point that Ducey made, which I think is correct, is that right now there are two things that we know work, well, maybe three things that we know work against Omicron. There's GlaxoSmithKline monoclonal antibodies. That still works against Omicron, but there's a shortage of that. There's a Pfizer pill, not the same as the Merck pill. The Merck pill is very ineffective, even though it was approved by the FDA. But the Pfizer pill works. There's a shortage of that. So the two things that really work, there's a shortage of that. Remdesivir works too. I don't think there's a shortage of that. They're going to ramp up use of remdesivir. But so like there's 2 or 3 things that work. The real problem, in my opinion, is putting aside all the thing about lockdown, don't lockdown, vaccine mandate, no vaccine mandate. Biden should have invoked the Defense Production Act to increase the supply of all the monoclonal antibodies. And yes, now 2 of the 3 don't work. Okay, that's fine, but maybe there'll be another variant where they do work. But you should have had the GlaxoSmithKline antibody sitting there in a massive supply when we were in the pandemic. You should have used the Defense Production Act. You should have the Pfizer pill in massive supply. The fact that they don't invoke the Defense Production Act today and do that is a crime. It's a crime. So there is blame to go around. I think most of the blame goes on the government because there was a study from Public Citizen. 33% of COVID deaths could have been prevented. 33% of COVID deaths are attributable to what we call uninsurance, which is people don't have insurance. They're either uninsured or underinsured. So they want to go to the hospital when they're sick and they end up dying. So that's, if you look at the excess deaths today, the real COVID death rate is probably just over 1 million. That means 330,000 people's lives could have been saved if we just had universal health care. Whose fault is that? That's the government's fault. That's the government's fault. So yes, blame Biden. Yes, blame the government. They should have acted in a more intelligent way, and they didn't. And now, instead of having that conversation, the conversation we're having is we're at each other's throats, talking about which mitigation approaches are most reasonable and not. And the right wing generally now is against everything, you know? Like, they don't want, not only do they not want a vaccine mandate, well, fair, I didn't want a hard vaccine mandate either, but they were also against vaccinate or test, which is not a vaccine mandate, it's a choice. They don't want that either. They don't want that. And then also they turn around and they're like, well, we don't want masks either then. So you don't want vaccine or test, and you don't want masks, and you want to get back to letting it rip. Okay, then just own the fact that you're going to have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 maybe deaths per week. Own that fact. Just own it. But they don't own it. They want to say, get back to normal, but also don't look at any of the negative side effects of getting back to normal. Well, look, I'm not pro-lockdown, but I don't have a cinder block where my brain is supposed to be, so I could look at the negative effects and be honest about them. Look, the real answer, and it was the answer all along, from day one, you should have paid people to get vaccinated, or the vaccine or test policy was now slapped down by the Supreme Court, so you can't do that. Congress, in theory, could have passed a law to directly say vaccinate or test, but they didn't do that. But up front, if you really wanted to do the right policies, either pay people to get vaccinated, do a vaccinate or test policy that was more specific, so it would stand a test from the Supreme Court potentially. I mean, that was the approach, and create all of the therapeutics through the Defense Production Act, which would have helped us stave off the worst effects of this, and beef up hospital capacity, which is another thing that Biden could have done, but he didn't do, because now you have hospitals overflowing. I think that was the right approach. And then, yeah, I mean, if you are unvaccinated, you have to understand you're at much higher risk. And would it be intelligent for them to probably wear masks? Yes, it would. And I get it. Look, I'm vaccinated, and when I have to wear a mask, I do wear a mask. It's not really about me in that instance, because I'm looking out more for the unvaccinated people. Because I'm going to be generally okay if I get COVID. I mean, the numbers are clear. You have over 90% protection from severe illness, hospitalization, and death, even with Omicron, with the vaccine. So you can still spread it. So the ability to prevent the spread of the virus has reduced massively with the new variants, but you still have the protection against severe illness, hospitalization, and death. So when I wear a mask, it's more looking out for the unvaccinated than looking out for myself. And so I don't think, am I slightly annoyed by it? Sure. But I know it also might end up, if I have COVID and I'm asymptomatic and I'm spreading it, if I'm wearing the mask, I might end up saving somebody or their grandma because I was kind enough to wear the mask. So look, I'm not in favor of lockdowns, but I do think that if you're not going to have lockdowns, then the basic public health measures should be in place. And that's everything I just described. Should have been a vaccinate or test policy, or should have been pay people to get vaccinated policy. Should have beefed up hospital capacity and beefed up the Defense Production Act for all the therapeutics that actually work on this thing. That needed to be done. And yes, in some instances, mask mandates. Because I don't want 2,000 people dying per week. I want us to be open and everything to be functioning, but I also don't want 2,000 people dying per week. And if people are telling you they want the let it rip strategy, okay, well, we're kind of witnessing that right now, and the result is 2,000 people dying per week. So their answer, if they're being honest, is throwing up their hands and saying, fuck it. And of course, it's fuck it unless and until it impacts you or your family or whatever. Then it's like, oh my God, this is a tragedy. Yeah, no shit. The fucking over 1 million COVID deaths when you include the excess death rate in the country, that wasn't enough to open your eyes to it? Well, no. It's only when you experience it personally do people really have the light bulb moment, because a lot of times people are selfish. So Ducey, since he had the personal experience, he's trying to like moderate the conversation here a little bit and be like, guys, don't, just because the government has been wrong on many things, they've maybe lied in some instances, and the institutions and the officials are constantly wrong, doesn't mean you can say, it's all bullshit, throw your hands up and let it rip. Because there are consequences to that, and you at least have to acknowledge the consequences to that, and they don't want to do that. They want to have their cake and eat it too, say, get back to normal, and let's just not talk about the 2,000 people dying per week and the hospitals being overburdened. And I mean, think of the stress you put on them, nurses, doctors. Do you just not give a fuck about them? And the answer is that correct. They don't give a fuck about them, which is why even minor mitigation things like masks or vaccinator tests, they flip out over. So anyway, look, final thing. Just get vaccinated. That's it. If you get vaccinated, you're largely going to be okay. You know, I mean, that's what the data shows. Every day, or not every day, like every week, I see a new chart that comes out where it's like, unvaccinated hospitalization, yep, it goes straight up with Omicron. Vaccinated hospitalization rate, yep, almost a total flat line. Maybe a tiny uptick, but usually that's the people who are vaccinated, but then they have like some serious comorbidities, and like 2 or 3 of them, or they're like massively overweight or something. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out. If you do get vaccinated, you're largely going to be okay, so just get vaccinated. And then, you know, the conversation becomes more abstract and esoteric if you're vaccinated and everybody you know is vaccinated. But clearly, Kilmeade and Ducey don't like each other, and this is another example of it yet again. Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.